I have an embarrassing confession to make. I use Threads. In fact, I've used it since day one. Now, before you call me a woke liberal NPC, I'm well aware of its flaws. To many, it's X, but worse. Much worse, even. It has fewer features, it's linked with Instagram and Facebook, so your friends and family can see what you post and are even alerted to your presence there. It's generally not as real time. The content just isn't as appealing to many who've tried to get into the platform, feeling like it lacks the spontaneity and edge of X or even Bluesky. It also has a serious engagement rate problem and is owned by Mark Zuckerberg, who isn't much better, if at all, than the owner of the most popular alternative. There's no getting around it. Threads has a strange vibe to many. So you might be wondering why I use it, especially as I've just listed off its many problems. And I should say, I'm not trying to convince you to use it, or that everyone will find it more enjoyable than X or Bluesky or whatever social media platform you enjoy. But there's things I found enjoyable about it, and importantly, I found community there. And what's the purpose of a social network if not community? This is the internet eating itself, and let's get into it. The Verge leaked the first details of Threads in June 2023 from an internal meeting at a time when it was just called Project 92. There were limited details revealed, only that it would be a text-based social media app like X, that they were courting celebrities like Oprah and the Dalai Lama to get it off the ground, and that, surprisingly, it would use the decentralized social media protocol ActivityPub. A month later, Threads launched with its simple UI and a For You page only. No following feed. The app experienced explosive growth, hitting 100 million users in just 5 days and benefiting from the sharing of accounts with Instagram. Prior to launch, Meta Chief Product Officer Chris Cox had stated internally that they'd been hearing from creators and public figures who are interested in having a platform that is sanely run, that they believe that they can trust and rely upon for distribution. Of course, sanely run was a not-so-subtle dig at Elon's ownership of X, as Meta sought to seize on a moment where users were increasingly disaffected with the platform, looking to alternatives like Mastodon and Bluesky, the latter of which being invite-only at the time. Dislike, to put it mildly, of Elon would be a very common theme in the early days of Threads' launch. In fact, it was near universal, with many posts expressing distaste for Elon. To be honest, many still are. Even if you don't like him, it was a bit too much. Threads took on a distinctly center-left, or liberal in the American sense, vibe from the outset. Very #resist. Early Threads also suffered from chronic hyper-self-awareness, with a large proportion of posts about Threads itself. There was frustration about the lack of features, but also patience and a recognition of the small size of the team working on it. Overall though, there was a general sense of optimism, typical of any new platform. After the initial flurry of activity, the pace would drastically slow down. Many users, even most, didn't return to the app much in the months following launch. There were many reasons for this. Some simply forgot, some didn't find the posts engaging enough, some found moderation too restrictive, many didn't like the connection with Instagram and Facebook, especially as they'd find their posts being recommended on those platforms, with the ability to disable this only being added months after. No stats have been shared by Meta for this period, potentially because growth was underwhelming. I suspect this drop was anticipated, just as initial signups exceeded Meta's expectations. I also suspect that a lack of content played the biggest role in this, with many users having come from Instagram and not knowing how to post for a text-based app. Engagement was underwhelming for these creators, especially considering their large follower count and the numbers they were used to on other platforms. Their Instagram followings did give them a head start for Threads, as users would auto-follow anyone they already followed on Instagram, but this proved to be relatively meaningless, as many of their followers signed up for the platform and never returned. Creators would intermittently return to Threads to ask, "Does anyone still use this app?" only to be met with the sound of silence or angry replies from the diminished user base, defensive of what they had come to enjoy. Some creators would cross-post and do little more, an approach that tended to be punished by the algorithm. This lack of content may be why users were steered towards the For You feed, disallowed from setting the following feed as their default and hiding a lack of activity among those they follow in the process. But the algorithm also struggled in its infancy, easily over-indexing a specific topic if there was a surge of posts about it, quickly flooding users' feeds. Swell Entertainment recounts how this happened when there was an influx of Formula 1 fans to Threads.
When there was suddenly a F1 fan invasion onto Threads. Now, as a fan of F1, that in itself is not a problem. It did just become like engagement farming.
Meta would make serious attempts to grow Threads' user base in 2024. Meta hadn't released additional monthly active user data since October, so it's difficult to assess how much it had grown since then at the start of 2024, but its rate of growth had clearly slowed. seeing a golden opportunity to boost Threads' profile, Meta rolled out the red carpet for the launch of Taylor Swift's new album, The Tortured Poets Department, in April 2024. A special badge would appear on your profile if you used the hashtag, and Taylor herself even began posting on the app to promote it. Taylor's Slice of Stan Twitter, a name used to describe the various, often rabid fan bases that congregate there, would be a huge addition to Threads if Meta could get them on board. Taylor would post 3 times that month, and then nothing, having not made a single post since. 3 months later, Mindy Kaling would make her first post on the platform. Celebrities were still gradually onboarding onto Threads, with varying degrees of activity, but something about Mindy's first post struck users as odd. It felt so forced, so Meta approved, even receiving a reply from Instagram CEO Adam Mosseri that users felt suspicious. She would subsequently post a few more times and reply to some of the replies on her first post, and then nothing. This led users to speculate that she'd been paid for her posts, with Jonathan Garlick memeing, "The plan, pay Mindy Kaling thousands of dollars to make a post on Threads. No, she doesn't need to interact with anyone." User Joe Leblin commented, "Has anyone considered that Meta paid Mindy Kaling to make that post and not respond so she'd be the main character of the day?" To which Mindy would reply that she loves attention. Threads clearly wasn't giving Mindy enough of the attention she loved, as that would be her last reply to anyone as of April 2025. Threads would launch its bonus program around this time too, which didn't work the same as other platforms' revenue sharing programs. Rather, users would get paid for hitting certain view and likes thresholds, as well as a minimum number of posts. The criteria to get accepted into the bonus program and the size of the bonuses would prove to be a point of contention though. Meta's efforts to direct users to the platform in 2024 did seem to help though, although I'm not sure if Mindy Kaling or Taylor Swift had much to do with that. More so, it seems to have been creators realizing much of their audience was there, or at least enough of them to make it worth posting, or at least cross-posting. Useful features for creators had also been added, like analytics and drafts, making it worth spending more time there. The platform would hit 175 million monthly active users in July 2024 and 300 million by December, with 100 million daily active users. This included over 35 million signups in November alone and an average of 1 million signups a day for 3 months. Although I should say, Meta doesn't have the best track record when it comes to preventing bots. A slow X exodus would also benefit the platform, with each increasingly polarizing move from Elon. Some creators would struggle to get on board, however. Many left X due to its more lenient approach to hate speech, but found Threads moderation to be overzealous, often misunderstanding context or being prone to double standards. The most prominent example of this was what was dubbed Crackergate. An aspect of Threads' automated moderation meant that any mention of the word cracker was prone to being removed, even if used in the cheese and crackers sense. Mosseri would acknowledge this mistake, sharing that our reviewers, people, were making calls without being provided the context on how conversations played out, which was a miss. We're fixing this so they can make the better calls and we can make fewer mistakes. But it wasn't just moderation that put many off Threads. Perhaps the most common complaint among creators was that they found the Threads downranked posts with links in, a particularly big issue for journalists. Hank Green was one such creator displeased by this aspect of Threads, and in a comparison of link performance across X, Threads and Bluesky, found that his posts with links in performed significantly worse on X and Threads than Bluesky.
We got 1,000 likes on Twitter, we got 500 on Threads, and we got 3,800 on Bluesky. And that's a really big deal for me because, and also 300 quote tweets, which is wild. That means more people are giving it more action. And so it's like a really vibrant place. But part of me is like, well, I have heard that like links are downranked on Threads and Twitter because they end sessions. People stop using the platforms when you click on a link. You're not on Twitter anymore, and so they can't advertise to you anymore. And now that's bad for them.
This is, of course, due to most Bluesky users using a chronological following-only feed. Bluesky not penalizing links is something that the platform, including its CEO, often shout about. Mosseri has claimed that Threads doesn't downrank links and that users just don't tend to like and comment on links as much. Threads users, including Facebook co-founder Dustin Moskovitz, were skeptical of this. There have been several exoduses of Threads users to Bluesky, prompted by events such as Meta loosening moderation rules across its apps and the removal of third-party fact-checking. We don't have numbers on the scale of these losses, but it was certainly enough to rattle Meta's communications director, who felt the need to share an article bragging about how much Threads had grown as the exodus was taking place. Perhaps most obviously though was the quick addition of features that attracted users to Bluesky, such as starter packs and custom feeds, neither of which are quite as powerful as their Bluesky equivalents. Zuckerberg promptly created the most NPC memes starter pack featuring low-effort content recycling machines such as Puberty, Memes Art, and Kale Salad. Thanks for putting us onto the hot memes, Zuck. Then again, this is the guy liking AI slop on Facebook, so maybe I'm expecting too much. Some users have steered clear of Meta products entirely though because of Meta's horrendous track record and the ethics of supporting someone like Mark Zuckerberg. While not unique to Threads, engagement bait has proven to be a huge problem and has been since its early days. I recently took a 2-month break from the app, which largely reset my algorithm and gave me a sense of just how bad suggested posts can be for a new user. Hot takes about tipping, food, politics, cultural differences, bad birth control advice, bringing bouncy castles to protests. Often, posts are deliberately angling for engagement, but sometimes people are just that dumb. Either way, users just can't help replying. This brings me on to my next point, Threads' user base. What's been Threads' biggest advantage since day one, the massive pool of Instagram and Facebook users that Meta has been able to funnel into it, has also meant that its users tend to be a bit less online and generally have a harder time interpreting posts. They also have a tendency to get angry very quickly, especially when they don't understand something. There's a pervasive, chronic inability to recognize jokes that might be obvious to you. No matter how obvious you think a joke is, it's not obvious enough. In fact, this issue is so pervasive, a term has arisen. Threads users not getting it. Tongues. This issue is symptomatic of a bigger problem with Threads. Context collapse. Defined in Charlie Warzel's 2021 Substack post as occurring when a surfeit of different audiences occupy the same space and a piece of information intended for one audience finds its way to another, usually an uncharitable one, which then reads said information in the worst possible faith. Posts that get any kind of traction, normally among existing followers or in a specific niche, will quickly quote-unquote break containment and be shown to users without a similar sense of humor or experiences online. This results in angry or confused engagement, encouraging the algorithm to spread it further and fueling the cycle. As the algorithm doesn't distinguish between positive and negative engagement, any posts must be made under the assumption that they will be misunderstood by many. Threads users who have been on the platform a long time have learned to develop a thick skin to this, often opting to mute notifications past a certain point. Speaking purely anecdotally, these same users that are more inexperienced when it comes to text-based social media seem to also be much more prone to falling for misinformation. Fake Elon tweets are a prime example of the misinformation found on Threads, often being picked up by blue wave types who don't make an effort to verify what they're seeing, blindly engaging with anything that validates their beliefs. Even Kara Swisher, co-host of the popular Pivot podcast and tech journalist, has fallen for fake Elon tweets multiple times and never acknowledged this. Efforts to point this out are often met with reactions akin to, well, it sounds like something he might say, which really isn't the point. It's not just those left of centre falling for misinformation on Threads though, with the platform featuring its fair share of right-wing misinformation too, often in the form of recycled fake news stories, such as anti-woke film studios and Candace Owens being signed for The View. Threads does seem to lean left, probably because many of its users left X in dissatisfaction with Musk, but right-wing views have grown in prominence. This is possibly the product of older users joining, although Meta hasn't released a full breakdown of users by age range, only that, as of February 2025, almost 29% of Threads users were aged between 25 and 34 years old. Additionally, 20% of users were between 18 and 24 years old. Despite some articles claiming that Threads has a younger audience, these figures actually work out lower than X's, unless Threads has a huge proportion of users under 18 that makes up for the fewer 18 to 34 year olds. Anecdotally though, I've observed an increase in older users, possibly because the UI is more simple than X's, and Meta has been directing Instagram and Facebook users towards Threads. Commenting on the increase in older users on Threads, Swell Entertainment observed,
I think because it's text-based, they love Threads. They feel comfortable on Threads in a way they've never felt comfortable on Instagram. So because of that, you've got a lot of even right-wing related topics doing very well on Threads because they do well on Facebook.
A lot more provocative right-wing takes have been appearing too, although that may just be to garner engagement from Threads' left-leaning users. So, considering all these problems, why do I use Threads? I did say I wasn't trying to convince you to use it, after all. Contrary to what I've implied, Threads does have some appeal. What makes Bluesky great for creators and journalists is kind of what makes Threads great for normal users. While chronological, non-algorithmic feeds are great for those with a large following, Threads is great for connecting individual users with a large audience. More of a many-to-many approach versus one-to-many. The result is that random, thoughtless posts can get surprising amounts of engagement, much more than users are used to on other platforms. Granted, this engagement is often not wanted and often from people not understanding jokes and often very angry, but personally I found it great for connecting and making friends, which has also made it very hard to leave. In many ways, it is reminiscent of the early days of Facebook before it developed the terrible reputation it has now, when you would use social media to connect with friends and often make friends with their friends too. The kind of network effect that made Facebook so successful. Part of Threads' appeal is that it isn't intimidating. The fact that it isn't a hub of news and politics the same way X and Bluesky are makes the stakes feel a bit lower. And while it's become a bit more real time since launch, there's a general acceptance that it isn't where the action is happening. And for many, that's fine. The algorithm can be quite good at showing interesting relevant posts too, but its biggest weakness is how much training it requires. Like I said, after mine reset, it took a while to get back to normal. Blocking is a particularly effective tool in creating the feed you want. And when it comes to toxicity, it feels like this is a problem for all platforms. They just each have their own flavour. While you won't get literal Nazis in your replies, people will unleash hell on you for making a joke. So pick your poison, I guess. Its simplicity is also part of Threads' appeal. While many like Twitter's evolution to X, the everything app, to some it feels cluttered and awkward. That being said, Threads would really benefit from communities. Groups is one of the few good things Facebook has going for it after all. We've been experiencing a fragmentation of the social media landscape over the past 5 years or so, arguably starting with TikTok's explosive growth in 2020 and its undermining of Instagram's dominance in the short-form video space. Similarly, Bluesky and Threads have undermined X's position, albeit not to the same extent. When it comes to messaging, there's now Snapchat, WhatsApp, Signal, and Telegram, all with their own strengths and types of audiences. For streaming, there's now Twitch, YouTube Live, TikTok Live, and increasingly Kick. Even Reddit, itself something of a challenger until recently, had small offshoots arise following a series of exoduses in response to unpopular platform changes. And even Tumblr is seeing a resurgence in popularity, especially among Gen Z, prompted in part by users creating a space to archive their favourite TikToks and then finding they liked it there. There's a real appeal in having everything in one place. I can certainly understand the logic in trying to create an everything app, like China's WeChat. Who wants to have to check 10 different apps to stay up to date after all? It's even more of a pain for creators who have to cross-post to all these apps, which often have slightly different limits and features, like character counts. Even before the recent increase in platforms, many of us felt worried about missing out on posts or not being up to speed on the latest memes and news. But might this fragmentation be a good thing? After all, it places less powers in the hands of single individuals or companies and also helps us diversify our sources of information, meaning we don't put too many eggs in one basket. If platforms limit speech or manipulate algorithms in ways we don't like, we can move to other platforms without having to start from zero. When the TikTok ban loomed, creators scrambled to direct their followers to Instagram, YouTube, even Rednote, trying to maintain the audience they depend on for their livelihoods. While the content many of these creators produce might seem frivolous, this also includes activists and journalists. This is similar to what happened with X. Whether you agree with the decision to leave or not, when leaving, it's difficult to rebuild followings, even if you have passionate followers. Both the TikTok ban and X's change in leadership highlight our overdependence on single platforms. But what if you could take your followers with you when you move, or have your followers see your posts even from a different app? The equivalent to seeing Reddit posts on X or Instagram posts on Tumblr. And not screenshots either, actual posts that you can engage with. This is what decentralized protocols are for. They implement shared standards that social networks can use so users on different platforms can see each other's content. The Fediverse is an example of this, a collection of social networks that can communicate with each other, doing so using a standard called ActivityPub. In decentralized social networks, accounts are treated similar to email addresses. There's nothing stopping you from sending an email from a Gmail account to someone who uses Proton Mail. Threads' use of ActivityPub, and thus involvement in the Fediverse, has been a feature touted by Meta since its first announcement. Being cynical, this could be seen as Meta's way of anticipating future legislation around interoperability, most likely from the EU. To many, the announcement came as something of a surprise though, Meta seeming to loosen its grip over its services and moving towards being more open. Regardless, this has been a promising aspect of Threads from the start, potentially bringing hundreds of millions of users to the Fediverse, which would vastly outsize any of the existing platforms in it. Mastodon was the largest platform before, and it's very small and niche, albeit very popular with some communities. Despite the excitement, Threads' rollout of Fediverse features has been slow, to say the least. Deciding to make Fediverse sharing optional is understandable, but it's definitely limited the number of people using it, just based off how often I've seen the Fediverse sharing icon on posts. This is likely due in part to the fact that many users have a hard time understanding the Fediverse. Features have been added piecemeal, frustratingly slow for many, including myself. First was the ability for other Fediverse users to see posts, then the ability for them to like, follow, and eventually reply to posts, and most recently, Threads users have been able to follow Fediverse users, but these don't appear in the main For You feed. And you can't actually look Fediverse users up, you can only follow them if they've engaged with a Threads account in some form, and you can't reply back if they reply to one of your posts. Given that it's approaching 2 years since Threads' launch, that's not great, and not really in the spirit of the Fediverse either. Meta's recent loosening of moderation rules also seems to have stifled Threads' Fediverse ambitions, as it's now been blocked by even more servers than had blocked it from the outset. There's even a website tracking which servers have blocked Threads. Meta has a serious uphill battle if it wants to win back the trust of other servers in the Fediverse. All this has left many Threads users disillusioned, especially as Bluesky's equivalent of ActivityPub, AT-Proto, seems to be growing each week, with the addition and growth of new apps using it. While niche at the moment, maybe more niche than its proponents realize, decentralized social media has the power to revolutionize the existing paradigm. Tumblr joining the Fediverse also shows huge promise, likely to drastically increase the number of users in it and unlock the network effects that come with it. The bulk of text-based discourse is still happening on X. Stan Twitter, Sports Twitter, Black Twitter continue to be hugely influential. While Threads closes in on X's monthly active users total, it certainly hasn't replaced it, despite many's hopes. But regardless of your opinions on Elon or X, it's clear that his ownership has changed the social media landscape. And it's clear that these alternatives are in it for the long run, with people having used Bluesky and Threads consistently for a couple of years now, and the latter having recently launched ads and the former sizable enough to get VC funding. Bluesky is more of an X equivalent than Threads, although it has features that many love, like moderation lists, labeling services, and the eschewing of algorithms. For many on X and Threads, it's been a case of choosing the lesser of two evils when it comes to the billionaire owner in charge. Many have accepted that they'll probably never like the person who owns the platform they post on. Even Bluesky's users have treated its VC funding with deep skepticism. Most of us just want to stay connected, something that's more important than ever, at a time when we're feeling lonelier than ever. But what do you think? Have you ever used Threads? Did you love it, hate it, get bored with the engagement bait? Let me know down in the comments and hit those like and subscribe buttons while you're there. I release a new video every couple of weeks. And thanks for sticking around until the end. I think this is my longest video yet, so hopefully you found it interesting. Until next time, see ya.